Have you ever felt like something deep inside is holding you back, but you can't quite name it? Like no matter how much you try to grow, something hidden keeps pulling you into the same old patterns? That's not just bad luck or laziness. It's the shadow. Carl Jung called it the part of ourselves we do not wish to be. It's where we bury our anger, our fear, our envy, but also our courage, our power, and our truth. Most of us try to become better by improving what's visible. But what if the real transformation begins in the dark by facing the very parts of ourselves we've spent a lifetime avoiding? In a world obsessed with light and positivity, we've forgotten that wholeness doesn't come from pretending to be perfected. It comes from embracing what we've rejected. On this episode of X, we're diving deep into one of Jung's most powerful ideas, that the person you're afraid to become might actually be the person you were meant to be. And unless you face that shadow, it will quietly shape your fate, sabotage your growth, and block your freedom. This isn't about shyness, it's about liberation. So ask yourself, what part of you have you buried? And what might happen if you finally dared to bring it into the light? To understand what's truly holding you back, we need to go inward, not toward motivation quotes or surface-level tips, but toward the part of yourself you've been avoiding. Because that's where the real work begins. The shadow isn't just a theory. It's real. It lives inside you, shaping the way you react when you're triggered, how you behave when no one is watching, and what you say when you're angry or afraid. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." That's not just a warning, it's a map. Your shadow is the collection of all the traits you've learned to suppress or deny. Maybe you were taught that anger is unacceptable, so now you bottle it up until it explodes. Maybe you were told that being ambitious is arrogant, so you play small even when you want more. Maybe your sadness was dismissed as weakness, so now you smile through pain, hoping no one notices. But here's the truth. What we repress doesn't disappear, it waits. And it leaks out when we least expect it, through emotional outbursts, passive-aggressive comments, broken relationships, or decisions we later regret but can't explain. Have you ever overreacted and thought, where did that even come from? That's your shadow speaking, not to hurt you, but to get your attention. Most people assume the shadow is all negative, but that's a misunderstanding. Your shadow also holds parts of yourself you've forgotten: your courage, your creativity, your intuition, even your hidden talents. These aspects were buried not because they were harmful, but because someone at some point taught you they were unacceptable, and so you exiled parts of your own truth in exchange for approval. The tragedy is that we spend years polishing the surface, trying to look good, be liked, fit in, while the most authentic, powerful parts of us are left in the dark. And over time, we begin to confuse who we truly are with the mask we wear. That's why Jung insisted that transformation doesn't begin with light, but with the darkness we dare to face. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This means you have a choice. Keep running from your shadow, and let it control you from the backgrounder. Turn toward it, and begin reclaiming your life. So here's your invitation. Start paying attention to the parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore. What makes you uncomfortable? What traits in others do you judge harshly? What emotions do you try to push away instead of understanding? These are not weaknesses. They are doorways. Because in the end, your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you that holds the key to becoming whole. And only by meeting it with honesty, not shame, can you finally become the person you were always afraid to be and meant to become. Now that you understand the shadow, let's go deeper into the architecture of the mind that Jung laid out. Because to truly integrate what's hidden, we need to understand what it's hidden behind. Carl Jung made a key distinction between the ego and the self. The ego is what you think of as you, your conscious identity. It includes your thoughts, memories, roles, and the image you carry of yourself. It's the narrator in your head that says, "This is who I am." But that narrator doesn't tell the whole story. The self, in Jung's model, is much more expansive. It's the totality of who you are, both what you know and what you don't. It includes your instincts, your dreams, your traumas, your desires, your shadow, and more. Imagine your ego as the small tip of an iceberg floating above the water. The self is the entire structure, most of which is submerged, and it's from that hidden depth that the shadow emerges. But between the ego and the shadow, there's something else, the persona. This is the mask you wear in public. It's how you present yourself to fit in, be accepted, or play a role, whether as a student, employee, parent, or friend. It's shaped by culture, upbringing, and social expectations. And in moderation, it's useful. You need a persona to function in society. The danger comes when you confuse the persona with your true identity. Maybe you've always been the responsible one, the peacemaker, the nice guy, or the quiet girl. Over time, you start to believe that's all you are. But that's not your essence. It's a performance. Jung warned that the more we identify with our persona, the more disconnected we become from the rest of ourselves. The persona is a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. And here's where things get dangerous. When you spend too long performing a role, you lose access to the emotions and instincts that don't fit that image. The anger you suppress to stay likable, the ambition you downplay to seem humble, the sadness you hide to appear strong. All of it gets pushed down into the shadow, and what you reject internally will find its way out externally, often in damaging or confusing ways. This is why so many people feel emotionally exhausted, anxious, or hollow, because the life they're living isn't grounded in their full self. It's built on a persona, maintained by the ego, while the shadow fights to be seen. So, the question is, who are you really, underneath the roles you play? What parts of yourself have been silenced, not because they're wrong, but because they didn't match the image you were trying to maintain? The path forward isn't about destroying the ego or personates, about placing them in service to the self. It's about becoming aware of when you're acting and when you're being. It's about making space for the parts of you that have been ignored and choosing integration over suppression. Because the moment you stop performing and start exploring, something shifts. You begin to see your reactions not as random, but as revelations. You stop chasing approval and start discovering authenticity. And that's when the real transformation begins, not from trying to be someone better, but from remembering the wholeness you were always meant to live. Once you start peeling back the mask and confronting the shadow, you'll discover something even more surprising. There's another presence inside you. A voice, a pull, a force that often seems irrational but deeply familiar. Jung called this your inner opposite. For men, it's the animathy, internal feminine. For women, it's the animustha, inner masculine. But don't let the labels distract you. These aren't about gender. They're about the energies within us that we've been taught to ignore. The anima governs emotion, sensitivity, connection, and receptivity. The animus expresses logic, direction, assertion, and strength. And no matter your biological sex, both forces live inside you whether you recognize them or not. The real issue comes when these energies are repressed. If you've spent years avoiding vulnerability, your anima may show up as emotional outbursts or a desperate need for intimacy. If you've buried your assertiveness, your animus might emerge as unexplained aggression or obsessive control. The parts of you that were silenced don't go away. They find new ways to act out, often without your consent. And that's where projection enters. What we refuse to accept within ourselves, we project onto others. You might find yourself inexplicably drawn to someone obsessed, enamored, even intimidated because they reflect a trait you've disowned. Or you might harshly criticize someone for being too emotional or too opinionated, when in fact, they mirror a part of yourself you were never allowed to explore. Projection is subtle. It's when your reaction to someone feels far bigger than the situation deserves. Maybe you feel a deep dislike toward a coworker who's just mildly arrogant, or feel an intense need to impress someone you barely know. These reactions aren't about them. They're about you. Specifically, the parts of you that are still unresolved, unacknowledged, or unlived. Let's take an example. You repeatedly fall for partners who are emotionally unavailable. You tell yourself it's bad luck or chemistry, but underneath, there may be an unconscious pattern, an internal image shaped by your own denied needs or beliefs about love. You're not just falling for them. You're chasing a missing piece of yourself through them. This inner dynamic becomes even more intense when we're unaware of it. That's when relationships become confusing, cycles repeat, and we end up feeling powerless without realizing we're the ones replaying the script. But the moment you begin to turn inward and ask, why does this affect me so much? You open a door, not to blame yourself, but to understand. Because when you spot a projection, you reclaim power. What once controlled you becomes a message. What once hurt you becomes a lesson. So ask yourself, who are you irresistibly drawn to and why? What kind of people make you irrationally angry, intimidated, or fascinated? And what might those feelings be trying to teach you about yourself? The journey toward wholeness isn't just about looking into the darkness. It's about recognizing what you've cast onto others and gently pulling it back into your own awareness. Because everything you need to grow is already within you. It's just been hiding in plain sight. As you continue to confront the unconscious forces shaping your behavior, a realization begins to settle in. Your inner world is not abstract, passive, or symbolic, it's alive. The fantasies you dismiss, the dreams you forget, the sudden images that flash in your mind when you're lost in thought, they're not just mental noise. They're messages. And often, they're coming from the shadow. In modern culture, we're taught to value what we can touch, prove, and measure. The physical world is treated as real, the inner world as secondary. But this belief is not only limiting, it's dangerous. Because most of what drives your actions comes not from logic, but from what lies beneath it. Your imagination is not just a creative tool, it's the language of your unconscious. It speaks in symbols, metaphors, and emotional images. That's why a dream can leave you shaken long after you wake up. That's why a recurring fantasy can haunt you for years. And that's why ignoring these inner signals doesn't make them disappear. It just ensures they'll resurface when you're least prepared. Think of the shadow as a kind of autonomous presence that lives within the psyche. It's constantly working to bring balance. When you suppress an emotion too long, like grief, desire, or fear, it doesn't vanish. It transforms into images, impulses, or unexpected reactions. It might show up in a dream as a dark figure, or as an overwhelming emotion in the middle of an ordinary day. That's not coincidence. That's the unconscious demanding to be seen. And often, what appears irrational at first is deeply meaningful when viewed symbolically. A dream of falling may reflect a loss of control. A recurring nightmare could point to a truth you're avoiding. Even intrusive thoughts might represent the return of a part of you that's been denied too long. But instead of decoding these messages, we numb them. We scroll past them, medicate them, distract ourselves with productivity or noise. And in doing so, we widen the gap between who we appear to be and who we really are. But here's the turning point. When you begin to take these inner images seriously, something changes. You realize that the mind isn't working against you. It's trying to speak to you. That unsettling dream, that sudden urge, that uncomfortable pattern, they aren't threats. They're clues. And if you follow them, they'll lead you somewhere honest. This is not about becoming overly mystical. It's about learning to listen. Your shadow doesn't only contain shame or rage, it may also hold the confidence you were punished for showing, the creativity you were told was childish, or the voice you learned to silence. And the unconscious, through its rich inner theater, will keep reflecting those disowned parts back at you until you're ready to reclaim them. So ask yourself, what emotion do I keep pushing away? What image keeps returning to me in silence? What dream have I tried to forget? Because the truth is, your shadow isn't hiding from you. It's waiting. And every time you ignore it, you miss an opportunity to become more whole. By now, you've seen that the shadow isn't just some abstract idea, it's active. It shows up in your habits, your triggers, your relationships. The question is, are you paying attention? Let's get practical. Imagine this. You're in a conversation, and someone disagrees with you. It's a small thing, but suddenly, your chest tightens, your voice gets sharp, and you feel an urge to defend yourself aggressively. Later you think, why did I get so upset over that? Or maybe you see someone online who's loud, confident, maybe even arrogant, and your first impulse is to criticize, to roll your eyes, to feel annoyed. Ask yourself, is it really about them? Or is it something they're reflecting back to you? These are small windows into your unconscious. Every overreaction, every flash of judgment, every time you say, I don't know why I acted like that, those are entry points to the shadow. Let's go deeper. Have you ever found yourself constantly drawn to emotionally unavailable partners or sabotaging opportunities just when things start going well? That's not just coincidence or bad luck. Often, it's your unconscious recreating familiar pain, reinforcing a hidden belief you've carried since childhood like, I'm not worthy, or love always leaves. And until you become aware of it, you'll keep playing out that same script over and over. So here's something to reflect on seriously. Pause and think. What pattern in your life keeps repeating no matter how hard you try to change it? What personality traits in others make you instantly irritated or uncomfortable? What feelings do you avoid at all costs? Anger, sadness, pride, vulnerability? Write them down. Sit with them. Don't judge them. Just observe. Because shadow work isn't about blaming yourself. It's about noticing. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. One way to start observing your shadow in real time is to track your emotional spikes, those moments where your reaction feels disproportionate to the situation. What was said? What did you feel? What memory did it activate? Often, the shadow isn't hiding deep down. It's right there in your irritation with a coworker, your jealousy toward a friend, or your guilt after saying no. Let's say someone sets a boundary with you, and you feel rejected or offended. The mature response would be to respect their space, but your shadow might interpret it as abandonment, triggering an old wound. Without awareness, you might react with passive aggression or withdraw completely. But with awareness, you can pause, reflect, and choose differently. That's the power of integration. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. The traits you dislike most in others often point to the exact qualities you've disowned in yourself. So next time you catch yourself judging someone harshly, ask, what does this say about me? Not in shame, but in curiosity. The more you practice this, the more patterns begin to unravel. The shadow loses its grip, not by force, but by attention. You start making choices from intention, not from old wounds. So I invite you to look at your life this week like a mirror. What frustrates you? What repeats? What makes you feel small, angry, or unseen? Because the answers you're looking for out there often live inside you. And if you feel brave, drop a comment and share one insight that came up while watching this. Because you're not alone, and your story might help someone else feel seen too. Until now, we've explored how the shadow operates on an individual level, shaping your triggers, patterns, and projections. But the shadow doesn't stop at the personal. There's a deeper layer, one that surrounds us every day, often invisible yet immensely powerful: the collective shadow. The collective shadow is the sum of everything a society doesn't want to admit about itself. It's the fear it suppresses, the truths it denies, and the wounds it refuses to heal. Just like individuals disown anger or vulnerability, entire cultures disown their past, their prejudice, their contradictions. And what's disowned doesn't disappear, it festers beneath the surface, influencing systems, behaviors, and beliefs on a massive scale. Look around. You'll see it in the subtle ways we divide people into us and them, in the way certain communities are stereotyped while others are glorified, in the silence that follows injustice, in the way history is edited to protect comfort rather than expose truth. For example, a society that glorifies productivity may shame rest. Those who are burnt out might be labeled as lazy. But beneath that label lies a collective fear, the fear of being seen as unworthy without constant achievement. Or take emotional expression. Many cultures equate vulnerability with weakness, especially among men. As a result, entire generations grow up disconnected from their feelings, unable to form authentic bonds. That's not just personal dysfunction. It's a symptom of something much larger. You'll also see the collective shadow erupt in moments of mass outrage. Think of online mobs that cancel individuals overnight, not for justice, but for release. People channel unprocessed anger, shame, and guilt onto a single person, someone they've never met. Why? Because it's easier to attack an individual than to confront a system. Easier to project blame outward than to look inward. But perhaps the most dangerous expression of the collective shadow is when violence becomes normalized. When war is justified without question. When racism, inequality, or cruelty are quietly accepted as part of the way things are. In those moments, people don't act from conscious choice. They act from inherited fear, generational trauma, and unexamined beliefs passed down for decades, even centuries. Here's something to sit with. What beliefs do you hold because you were told they were true, not because you questioned them? What opinions have you inherited from your environment about gender, race, class, success, or failure that you've never stopped to examine? This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because the truth is, we're all shaped by the cultural air we breathe. And unless we become conscious of it, we'll unknowingly play out the very dynamics we claim to reject. So here's your invitation. Take a moment to observe the world around you through a different lens. What is your culture avoiding? What's being denied, laughed off, or silenced? And more importantly, how have those collective shadows shaped you? Because once you see it out there, you'll start seeing it in here. And that's the first step toward not just healing yourself, but becoming someone who no longer feeds the unconscious pain of the world. If any of this resonates with your experience, drop a comment. What's one belief or cultural message you've started to question lately? Let's make space for conversations that matter. There comes a point in everyone's journey where the work is no longer just about healing personal pain. At some stage, your inner conflicts begin to mirror something much larger, patterns that don't belong to you alone, but to the world around you. And when that happens, you're no longer just facing your shadow. You're facing ours. The collective shadow is not some abstract concept. It lives in the air we breathe, the beliefs we inherit, the silence we maintain. It's in the fear that spreads without language, in the unspoken shame passed down through generations. You may carry wounds that began long before you were born, shaped not only by your family, but by the unresolved traumas of your culture. And whether you realize it or not, your actions, your awareness matter. Every time you choose to look inward rather than pointing fingers, you interrupt the cycle. Every time you question a belief that was handed to you rather than chosen, you reclaim your autonomy. And every time you take responsibility for your unconscious projections, you do something radical. You stop feeding the very darkness you once feared. So I invite you to ask yourself, not as a rhetorical exercise, but as a true turning inward. What have I been taught to reject without understanding? What truths do I avoid because they make me uncomfortable? And what pain, mine or inherited, have I silently passed on to others? You see, the world doesn't just change when leaders make bold speeches or when systems are challenged. It changes when ordinary people like you make the decision to see clearly, to live with intention, and to no longer numb themselves to what's happening inside or around them. This isn't about shame. It's about integrity. It's about choosing to carry your part of the collective story with awareness, so others don't have to carry the burden of your unconsciousness. So take a breath and ask yourself, honestly, am I living in reaction or in responsibility? Because when you begin to face what your culture has hidden, when you dare to name what generations have denied, something powerful happens. You become part of the healing not just of yourself, but of the time you live in. And in a world that's still haunted by its collective shadow, that kind of courage is rare. That kind of presence is needed, now more than ever. So now you've seen the truth. The shadow isn't a flaw in your design, it's part of it. It's not the enemy. It's the part of you that has been waiting, silently, for you to return. And as difficult as it is to face, it holds the very keys to your strength, your clarity, and your freedom. This journey we've taken from the personal shadow to the collective one reveals a powerful insight. When you refuse to see what's hidden inside you, it will show up in your life, your relationships, and your culture. But when you turn toward it with honesty, everything begins to change. You stop reacting. You stop pretending. You begin living from something real. Healing doesn't mean becoming pure. It means becoming whole. It means accepting contradiction. It means carrying both light and darkness without letting either one define you. So I invite you, not just to watch this video and move on, but to ask yourself, right now, what part of me have I abandoned to survive? And what might happen if I finally chose to meet that part with compassion instead of fear? Because in the end, becoming who you're afraid to be isn't the beginning of your downfall. It's the beginning of your becoming. If this video stirred something inside you, share your reflections in the comments. Let others witness your truth, because you never know who might feel less alone by reading your words. And if you found value here, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to someone who's ready to see themselves more clearly. This is Psychology Insights. And remember, the darkness you carry is not a curse. It's an invitation. Answer it.